Metropolitan Planning Organization Administration and Finance Committee meeting to order. I'm going to read the notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression, veteran status, or background. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to show your first name, your last name, and affiliations. I think we can mute and unmute ourselves. So I think that one is possibly moot. To participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. Find this by clicking on either the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and the window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. I will then call on participants. If you're on the phone, which I don't believe anybody is, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, please contact Mr. Jonathan Church via the chat box or jchurch@ctps.org or 857-702-3709. This is the accessibility statement. This meeting is being recorded. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodation to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Mr. Jonathan Church via the chat box, via email at jchurch@ctps.org, or by calling him at 857-702-3709. Thank you. I am Brian Kane. I'm the Executive Director of the Mbta Advisory Board. I have nothing to do with the Orange Line this week, and I am here. And I'm going to ask Len, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Len Diggins, but wondering what you were doing with the Orange Line before this week, Brian.
Wouldn't you like to know?
So, I'm here with the, I'm representing the Advisory Council. Thanks.
Thank you, Leonard. Derek, can you please introduce yourself?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Derek Cravat, representing MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning.
And the three of us constitute a quorum, so we will proceed with this meeting. We'll move on to public comments. If there's any comments from any member of the public or even any member of the private who would like to comment, please identify yourself by using the raise hand function, and we would love to hear from you. I don't see any hands raised, so I will assume that that is moot. However, if anybody would like to comment at any other time during the meeting, please let anybody know by using the raise hand function, and we will, of course, call on you. Thank you. We'll now move on to the agenda item 3, which is a approval of the meeting summary for the June 16th, 2022 meeting. I'm going to assume that these have all been thoroughly and carefully reviewed by everybody. There'll be a quiz later for you, Derek. Is there a motion to approve the meeting summary?
I will make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion having been made and seconded. I'll call the roll, Jonathan, because what the heck. Derek.
Okay. Yes.
Len.
Yes.
I vote yes. Sorry, I chaired a meeting last night in Brookline where I had to do this, so I'm just in that mode. But I'll let you do it from now on, Jonathan. You're very good at it.
Oh, okay.
So that is approved. Okay, now we're going to move on to the heart of the matter, which is a discussion of the operations plan officer roles and responsibilities. Logan, can we put something up on the screen? Maybe there we go. Thank you. So this was sent out in advance and we asked folks to have a look at it, trying to put down in writing the role of the Boston Regional MPO officers, which are the chair and the vice chair. based on the MOU and on the enabling legislation as always. So one question that I sort of wrestled with a little bit yesterday, and as this was coming together, is, and this is going to be an open-ended question. When we say MPO, what do we mean? Do we mean the board? Do we mean the board and the staff? Do we mean all of the communities and entities involved? Do we mean, what do we mean?
Well, it depends on the context. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think we all know what we mean, but I don't know if it's ever been discussed or written down. So Leonard, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I was gonna say, this depends on the context, right? You know, so I mean, the Boston region MPO, I mean, is all of the communities, I mean, and the staff, I mean, and the board members, I mean, when we're talking about, I mean, our meetings, I mean, and the participants in those meetings, then we're generally talking about the MPO board, you know, and the staff. And I think I'm missing something here. So tell me what I'm missing, Brian, so that I can try.
Well, you're not missing it. It's just, it's kind of vague right now in the MOU. You know, if you read the first statement there, the chair of the Boston Region MPO, it doesn't say the region MPO board. It says yo. And I guess maybe this is just me being too intense, but
then that would mean board. Right?
Yeah,
It's the chair of the board.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so, because the MPO itself, to my mind, encompasses the board members, all the entities, CTPS, and the 97 communities.
Right.
Derek, I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think there's probably a distinction between how we talk about it, just kind of colloquially, and what the actual formal definition is. Like I just happen to look at a federal website. It's like FTA's website says a metropolitan planning organization is the policy board of an organization. So like, I think it's, you know, if we were to look into the actual regulations, maybe we'd find that the term MPO applies to the policy board itself. But when we talk about it, obviously, when we say MPO, I think a lot of the time we really mean everything collectively. So I think there might be a distinction between what it says in regulations and how we just kind of talk about it. If that matters, I don't know what it would be most relevant for the purpose of the MOU.
Well, I mean, the MOU is not within our
the
to
operations. Right.
talk about, but yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
the reason it comes up is because as we talk about the chair, it's the chair of the Boston Region MPO board.
Right.
I don't think we're saying that the secretary or their designee is the chair of all of those things.
Right.
And again, maybe this is a distinction that's not, it's a little too deep in the weeds, but you know, to me, when you're writing these things, you should make sure you're clear on what you're saying. So sorry, Len.
I was gonna say, I understand your motivation, Brian. You know, and yeah, I guess we are gonna write it. Let's be as clear as we can. So at least we set down the language, set it down consistently. And then, the shortcuts people use, when they're talking in whatever context is on them, to make it clear to the audience what they mean. You know, so I hear you. I agree.
Cool. So the first letter A there is the chair of the BRMPO board is the Secretary of Transportation of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts ex officio. Their term on the BRMPO board and as its chair begins upon their official first day of employment as Secretary of Transportation of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that seems pretty clear to me. Not sure if anybody has any thoughts on that. The MOU very clearly states that it is the Secretary of MassDOT who is the chair of the board. Well, there, I did it myself. It's the chair of the MPO. It doesn't say board. The next line is the secretary shall preside at all BRMPO meetings at which they are present. If the secretary cannot preside, their designee shall preside in their stead. And this gets to some other language in the MOU, which very clearly states that the secretary is the chair or their designee is the chair. I was sort of wrestling with the idea of drawing a pretty bright line between the chair of the organization being the secretary and then having a presiding officer or something else. But since the MOU makes it clear, and Tegan helped me realize this, thank you, Tegan, it seems like that's pretty clear. And then as far as what the responsibilities of the chair are, we have that they can, they sign on behalf of the organization, basically. They also respond to requests for information relevant to board business from MassDOT. And I wanted to ask about this one. I guess I don't fully grasp what we're trying to say here, and I'm asking for some clarification from somebody. So if we read this sort of the way with the definitions, it means the Secretary of Transportation or the Secretary's designee will respond to requests and information relevant to MPO business from the Department of Transportation. So the Department of Transportation is going to see clarification on things its own leadership is doing. Is that what we're trying to say? I'm not just unsure of that.
So it involves the sort of the requirements around in the MOU. I'm trying to always flip between these so I can be as precise as I can, around the chairs being expected to provide information in a timely way, which is incredibly vague and generic, and sort of like, what does that mean and why? And so this text provides some context too. If the board members make requests for information relevant to board business, that they, as the representative of MassDOT, can relate that there should be some compliance with 48 hours advance notice. Also kind of complying with public meeting requirements in terms of posting information within 48 hours. So this kind of came out of some earlier conversations also around the ad hoc committee that talked about getting information around projects when there are new projects being proposed in the TIP, when there's lack of readiness for certain projects. So this sort of codified some of those conversations around information being shared in advance of meetings rather than sort of at meetings. So very much open, any of this written is very much open for conversation. It pulls on what we've already heard at times from board members in these conversations and puts it in front of you for your reaction. I actually feel like Eric probably would have spoken to this better because it ties into some things that he was talking about when he was sharing, and unfortunately he's not here today.
Go ahead, Len.
Yeah, so I guess the question, and this is what Brian was getting at, but why is the prepositional phrase from MassDOT there, as opposed to from any member of the board? Because it goes on later on to kind of say that all members' questions are satisfied before calling the votes. I'm sorry, I just read that last sentence, last part of that last sentence there, but the whole point is to provide information so that all members of the board have the information they need to make a qualified vote. Yeah.
I think if you just strike the term from MassDOT, the thing makes a lot more sense. So the chair or their designee shall respond to requests for information relevant to board business at least 48 hours in advance of a meeting. That way, the request for information can come from anybody, not just from MassDOT. And we love MassDOT, and we know they would never not respond to our questions. So
that's correct.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
What it would make more sense if the chair weren't from. Well, I guess it's the Secretary of Transportation, but okay, never mind.
Sponsor.
So if I can offer, I think maybe one of the questions you might ask yourself is, what kind of information is the chair themselves officially responsible for? Is it from the agency that they represent? Is it any information from any agency? That might be a little bit trickier to sort of hold the chair accountable to. And so that might just be part of why this language is kind of focused more on the DOT side of things.
Well, I think the word relevant is an important clarifier there. So if it's a relevant information request to board business, then the chair is tasked with finding a response, whether it's from their organization or another. That's how I read it, with that phrase struck, at least. But I'm very cognizant of your comments, Tegan. We don't want to put an undue burden on anybody to, get information they're not privy to.
Right.
And the word that's not said, but that is always implied is reasonable, right? In any context, it's got to be reasonable because we can't have people gaming the request process, inundating us and then going, oh, but you didn't answer all my questions. It's got to be reasonable. But like I said, that just is implied. If we want to spell it out, we can. But then again, to the issue of defining reasonable on paper,
Yeah, it's like a good faith effort, to find
right.
that. But I think that's a little broader, and that makes a little more sense to me. Derek, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I think this is fine. I think it's assumed that if it's not a MassDOT item, we and OTP can work with the appropriate entities that it would be relevant for. Like I'm good either way.
Yep.
I'm just kind of curious in general, like, is this in response to has this come up before as an issue, or is this just putting into writing something that's already happening, basically, that it's just kind of something that's holding us accountable if we do get requests that we're being responsive and making sure we're answering questions before the meeting?
I think it's more of an overall trying to tease out what is said in the MOU to make it just a little more meaningful and a little clearer. As Tegan just said, there is stuff in the MOU now that requires MassDOT to respond, but it's really vague and opaque. And again, there's no question that there's any particular issue where members feel like they haven't. I can't speak personally to not having received any information I requested. Leonard.
Yeah, Derek, the way I'm thinking about this is think that if the board just went away for whatever reason, and you had to reconstitute this board, this would kind of be the instruction set for how to do it. So yeah.
Yep. Okay. Great. Yeah, that's helpful.
Yep.
Sounds good.
All right, Tegan.
I might also add, it's if the board were, dissolved and reformed these instructions, it's also the instructions for any new board member, right? Someone who's not used to the process at all. So knowing what those expectations might be for them around anything in this, I think is a good way to think about it.
Right.
Very good point.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, and the last thing is the chair will have such powers and perform such duties as may from time to time be voted by the MPO Board of Directors. Sort of a catch-all that gives the MPO board itself the authority to empower the chair to do things on their behalf. My only question there is, since we're using the chair or their designee above, should we just be consistent there in that last sentence? Tegan, do you have the MOU in front of you? Can you explain what it currently says for the vice chair?
So, sorry, I just have to scroll to it. The vice, all it says, and I think it's probably up at the top of the document if anyone has it open separately. The vice chair shall be a municipal representative or an official of one of the two regional agencies and shall be elected to a one-year term by the MPO members by majority vote. This election shall take place at the first meeting after the election of Boston Region MPO elected municipal representatives.
Okay.
And then the vice chair shall and or official designee shall preside at meetings in the absence of the chair or her official designee.
Okay. So again, this is trying to put a little flesh on those bones or build off of that framework. So as is the language in the MOU, the vice chair presides at meetings in the absence of the chair or the chair's designee. And then there's a question there of or alternate. And this gets into one of those questions that we've wrestled with, which is if the secretary's designee and then second designee has to leave, who fills in? Is it Derek? Is it Eric? Is it somebody else? And if I'm correct, the MOU states that the secretary or their designee presides. So theoretically, the secretary could designate another designee to preside. But then what's the point of having a vice chair? So this is one of those ones that I, it's like an order of succession, basically. We go from the secretary to the secretary's designee to the secretary's alternate designee. And then do we go to the secretary's third alternate, or do we go to the vice chair? And that's the question.
So the way it works right now is that David is the designee, right? And then I guess Steve would be considered the alternate, Steve Wolfel. And oftentimes, just because of scheduling conflicts, like David is obviously very busy. So sometimes it just happens that I almost use Steve and David as pretty interchangeable as being a designee. I would probably be more like they're on that level of kind of leadership at MassDOT where I feel like it would be appropriate for them to chair, and then it would go to vice chair. So I guess if we're going with the way it works right now, which I think is, I don't see a problem personally with it going from David to Steve to Eric. And I guess that would be designee or alternate. So I would just kind of make the case for having that in the plan, but that's just my 2 cents. Yep.
Go ahead, Len.
I think if it's designee, then it really doesn't matter who the designee is. So we don't necessarily know whether it's like the first, third, fourth, whatever. It's just a designee. And so it could be Steve, it could be anyone. And then if the designee isn't there, then it would go to the vice chair.
So if you look in the chat, the language Tegan just quoted, it does state in the MOU, official designee.
Oh.
So technically, according to the MOU, if David is the official designee and he's unavailable,
And it would be Eric.
then it's got to be the vice chair. Now, this gets into the whole credentialing question, right? Which is, how does the secretary officially inform the board who their official designee is, or are, if there's more than one?
Right.
And that's something we also got to wrestle with in this operations plan. Now, I am not attempting to say that if David Muller's unavailable, then Wolfel shouldn't sit in the chair. That's we've been doing that for a long time, and it's working to a certain extent. But if we're going to be honest with ourselves and truthful to the MOU, which I think is one of the things that the FHWA is sort of asking us to do without asking us to do it, then we have to really wrestle with this and either find a way through the operations plan to expand on what the MOU says, or through our credentialing process, allow for the secretary to have multiple designees.
Well, I guess it then hinges on what's meant by official designee, though, right? Is it that it has to be a stated person? Or does it just mean that person, is officially designated by the Secretary of Transportation to perform as chair of that meeting?
Right. But right now, we take it at face value that when David walks in the room, he's the official designee, right?
Right.
No, no one ever asks, right? Because we believe them and it's reasonable. It
Right.
makes sense. But again, if we all if this has to get reconstituted tomorrow with a bunch of people who don't know how it's always been done, what this says is what's going to fly.
And we just say that person, your papers, please. Produce your papers from the Secretary of Transportation telling us that you are the designee, in which case it could be anybody. So it doesn't have to be me, David, or Steve. It could be anybody as long as they're able to produce those papers.
So you're saying official designee can change ad hoc?
Ad hoc, right. As long as it comes from the Secretary of Transportation, then that's the designee. The official aspect of that person, what makes that person official is that it comes from Secretary of Transportation. It's not that it's a specific person. It's just that the Secretary of Transportation has designated that person to function as chair.
I agree with you, absolutely. But I also think functionally, we can't necessarily be going to Jamie Tesler every week and saying, we need a letter from you. So, I guess I'd like to find a way to allow the secretary to name multiple designees, as is the case now. Make them somehow be official, quote unquote, and then allow them to preside, but then draw the line and basically says when the two designees are unavailable, it's got to go to the vice chair.
It can't be Len. We're not going to allow you to designate Len.
Len, when you're Secretary of Transportation, all of this will be well taken care of.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with that approach. I think having two designees makes a lot of sense, having them at that level of designee. And then maybe having a vice chair, because we have had circumstances where Eric's also not available. So then it's like maybe having just a process built in whereby if the
Well,
vice chair can't make it, then what? Yeah, is there an alternate for vice chair?
I think at that point, the vice chair would be whomever their organization's alternate is. Because the vice chair is not the person, it's the representative of the organization or the municipality. So
Okay.
that's how I read it. But again, that's just my opinion. So
Yep.
trying to put a little language around sort of B here, and we gotta, I don't know if this will even fly, but we need something like the vice chair presides at meetings in the absence of the chair or the chair's designees with an S. And then we need another section somewhere about how designees are named officially. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Tegan, Gina, Jonathan, we have a placeholder for that somewhere. Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you. So I would, I'd put an S there. Thank you. Okay, anybody, any other issues with any of the less, so yeah, I guess my next question would be around the third sentence. I believed that MAPC, regardless of if or not they have the vice chairpersonship, runs the election process. Am I mistaken in my assumption there?
I wouldn't say you're mistaken. I think that's how it's traditionally been, is between MAPC and the Mbta advisory board. Is how we've done it for a number of, at least the last 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, I think this got a little bit muddled. It does say in the MOU, the nomination and election process shall be administered by MAPC, working jointly. It does not say vice chair. So that this should just be a replication of, this actually doesn't even need to be in the vice chair role because it's actually in the MOU. So I think we should strike that.
Yeah, I'd say we strike that sentence. Because it'll come up elsewhere. Okay, and now the question of agenda setting is the next big thing we have to grapple with. They shall collaborate on agenda setting with the chair and MPO staff. Can somebody from CTPS talk about how it's currently done and then also what the MOU says?
So I put the MOU language in the chat.
Tegan, you read my mind.
Which I think is all about. I'll double check. In the meantime, I think Logan, you can scroll to a section where we talk about the agenda setting process, correct? I'm trying to remember. It's actually above where we describe, what we do. So that's the current process of what we do. And there may or may not be a write-up below that. I'm trying to recall. I can look while you could probably leave that there for them, Logan. I'll look to see further down if there's more.
So right now, this is really a staff-driven process, is what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Logan can scroll down to the section. It's like pound.f in the draft write-up that puts it in sort of more of the framework of the operations plan versus us reporting on what we do. There you go.
Okay. So as far as agenda setting goes, it's pretty clear that the chair, and I guess we would add or their designee, set the agenda with the advice and input of the vice chair and staff. But then it looks like there's a loophole, not a loophole, but there's a method here for members to ask that something be put on the agenda. And then we're asking for a reasonable good faith effort from the chair and vice chair to bring those forward. Does anybody have any issues with this or with how it's done now? I mean, Tegan, Gina, Jonathan, somebody, how does it kind of work now? What's the process?
Well, I'll let Jonathan, I'll probably let you walk through the process as a whole. I just figured I'd highlight here that there's question marks throughout this just to trigger some level of conversation where this came up as an idea in one of multiple conversations around does the vice chair role have a more formal role in any part of this process that can be defined in terms of what collaboration means?
Yep.
And one of the areas that was brought up as a potential for that is in terms of managing requests for topics on the agenda, for example. It's just something that's come up, so we put it in here. Yep. If you want to discuss it or any other formal way that the vice chair might engage in more detail rather than simply providing advice and input, which is all that the MOU says.
I think I'd like, sorry, go ahead.
Yep. No, I was like, and then Jonathan can walk you through this process probably if you'd like him to.
Please.
Sure. So usually what we do 4 to 6 weeks before a board meeting, we will solicit items from staff that include everything on a running list of future agenda items, anything that's usually a standing item like the tip, which we know is typically done in March and April and May, to the UPWP, which is done in typically June and July. We will also be looking at additional presentations of MPO work and the like, and we will have a meeting every 10 days before the MPO meeting that will be held with OTP staff, which is the chair and our MPO liaison, as well as the vice chair and the executive director, Tegan, and other staff. So we will go over that agenda. We will talk about the items. We will agree on those items. If the group agrees, staff will then take that agenda, draft it, get it through our editorial process, and post it a week ahead of time for the MPO members to see. And then if we have the additional materials for those items, we'll post them with the agenda, or we will post them as we get them in prior to the 48-hour rule for the open meeting law. If we need to make a change to the agenda, we will do so again prior to the open meeting law requirements on that Tuesday before, and that is typically how we do it at this time.
That makes sense. So I guess what I would like to do or suggest is I think we would have a better conversation about agenda setting if Eric were with us, because he's been doing it for a long time. And so why don't we leave agenda setting to one side for right now? Logan, if you could please make a note in the vice chair section that we were just working on around coordinate on the agenda, that sentence. And I think, is there an agenda setting sentence under the chair section? If not, there should be. There should be similar language under the chair section and the vice chair section with regard to agenda setting. So that it's clear they both have to collaborate and who they collaborate with. But let's leave that till next time so we can get Eric's input. If you folks agree, that is.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, it's fine. Makes sense.
So then if we can go back, Logan, to part B. Yeah. Okay. So then the vice chair shall have such powers. That's the same as above. Okay, vice chair nominating process. So following the annual election of municipal representatives, which is typically this time of year, right? September, August, September. Members shall nominate a municipal representative or an official of one of the two regional agencies for a one-year term as vice chair. The nomination take place one meeting prior to the Boston Region MPO annual meeting referred to section C. Yes. So this is one of those things where the chair will and staff will have to, as part of the agenda setting process, again, know that when that meeting is coming up, and it might be helpful if there was some sort of a loose calendar at some point, you know, not prescriptive as far as dates go, but sort of times of year that we have to have an election. And I assume, and this is a question for folks, the nomination process will be, are we okay with having the nominating process be any member can nominate any other qualified member for the position of vice chair? Or should the state agencies who are ineligible from holding the office of vice chair not be permitted to nominate someone to be vice chair? If you follow what I'm saying. And so I'm asking a question, should we put qualifications on this or should we just leave it open?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I guess I would limit it to people who can vote, being the ones who can nominate.
Isn't there a process like for the elections process? Wasn't there a write-up of procedures for that? And I recall something about how anybody can nominate anybody, but the person being nominated also has to basically agree to be nominated. Like there needs to be some support from the community or agency that's being nominated that they actually accept the nomination. I feel like this was in the election procedures write-up, so maybe we could borrow some of that language as well. And I think Eric had taken the lead on that, but I'm not sure if that's readily accessible. Do folks recall that?
I don't, but I believe you.
I can try to pull that up.
So I mean, generally, so I see there's two questions, which is who can nominate? We know that only certain seat holding entities are eligible to hold the vice chair position. So then whom or which entity should be able to nominate and elect the vice chair is a question. And what is the process for doing that? And I think that's what you're trying to get at, Derek. And I would be perfectly happy putting in some kind of a thing where, you know, they need to accept the nomination. They need, you know, they need to be nominated by a qualifying member or a board member. They need to, then needs to be seconded, and then they need to accept the nomination before a vote takes place. Now that we could probably get away with Robert's rules covering that for us. But I'm also perfectly happy in putting it in here.
Yeah. I might be thinking of, so just to clarify, is this just for the election of the vice chair?
Yes.
Or are we talking? Oh, okay. Okay. I apologize. I was referring to general elections for MPO members. So
No, this is just the
this
vice
is just the
chair.
vice chair. Okay. Sorry about that. That I
Yep.
agree with. Yep. I agree with.
So
what
I'm
you
going
just
to
said, Brian.
propose
Yep.
that we limit the vice chair. I'm going to say that, let me start again. Only an entity, a regional entity or a municipal entity should be able to nominate another entity for the vice chairmanship. So that would mean that the DOT, the T, Massport would not be eligible to nominate someone or second their nomination. But Boston could, anybody like that could.
Initially, I was saying something along those lines, although I completely misspoke. And then I was thinking, well, let's say in like normal, just general election processes, who can nominate? I mean, what are the limitations of who can nominate? And there aren't any.
Any member. Well, first of all, we never do it.
Right. Right. Right.
So, but other organizations that I'm a part of, it's any member of the body.
Right. Because just because you can't occupy the position doesn't mean that you can't nominate.
Well,
So
we are saying that they can vote for, we're just saying they can't nominate. Let me tell you my reasoning. And again, this is not to suggest it's currently happening or would currently happen. But if all the state entities got together and said, you know what, we want Boston to have the vice chairmanship because we have a very close relationship with them, theoretically, they could, by just their sheer numbers alone of state agency members, make it happen. There isn't any check to ensure that there's a non-permanent seat holder in the vice chairpersonship, excuse me.
right. Yeah, no, I understand. Like I said, initially I said as long as I can vote, but like I said, misspoke. I was really thinking about nominating, but I was just thinking that I'm trying to think of other processes. Like, are you limiting who can nominate by only those who can occupy the position? And I mean, if that's done in other contexts, then I'm fine. I'm just thinking of kind of like even general democratic. Like town elections or whatever. Are you limited in who can nominate anyone? And here's a gross example that probably doesn't really fit, but you can't occupy, let's say, the presidency until you're like 35. So then, is anyone under 35 prevented from nominating someone for that position in any capacity? So like I said, I was just trying to understand what are the limitations in other organizations that we can nominate.
Well, I think the difference here is that the presidency itself is open to everyone.
Right.
This is a board representing a bunch of other people. And so I'm just trying to put some kind of a ring fence around the one officer position that those other people may have to have any influence at all.
Yeah.
But I understand if it's controversial, it's controversial.
No. I'm just thinking this through, Brian. So
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so it's not controversial in that I'm opposed to you. I was just really trying to think it through. So if you feel strongly, I'm inclined to agree.
Well, I feel strongly that we should consider it, Len. I don't feel we should strongly do it.
Okay.
All right, let's try to get through the rest of this in the 8 minutes that we have left.
Sure.
Annual meeting. I like the idea of an annual meeting. Hi, Tegan. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say you have this time scheduled actually for an hour and a half. Not 1 hour.
There we go. Thank you.
So you can keep going if you would like.
Excellent.
I don't know.
We can talk, trust me. So I guess what I would suggest, just to revert back to vice chair nominating, is Logan, you made the note there, thank you. This is another one of those where Eric, who has a vast deal of experience, should probably be allowed to weigh in. So let's leave that and get his input. And Derek, can you also try to feel out David and Stephen and other folks that have been doing this for a long time, if they feel this is very discriminatory or at all harmful to the interests of the Commonwealth, let us know.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not a hill I'm going to die on. But,
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to put some stuff in here.
And just
so
real
cool.
quick on the
Yeah.
on the note on timing, I think Jonathan and I are on a meeting at 3 with Federal Highway and others at CTPS.
I have stepped out of that meeting because I have 3
Okay.
staff members going, so I can
Okay.
speak to this.
Sure.
Well,
Yep.
Derek, if you
that's
got to
fine.
go, that's our quorum. So
Right.
we'll,
I could certainly stay. I just know that one is scheduled, but I can just let folks know that I'm on this, but that's totally fine. I just wanted to mention it in case it.
all right. Well, how about
what
this?
impact it
We
did.
will try to move quickly through this so that you can get there
Yep.
as soon as you can.
Will
Yep,
you mean the
no
fact
worries.
that it makes quorum at that other meeting, Derek? That wasn't this one.
Oh, no,
so-
it's not, yeah, that is not a public meeting, so I'll let them know I'll be a little late, and that's totally fine. I just wasn't sure if others here were gonna be at that one, so, yep, sounds good.
Yeah, thank you. So annual meeting, so Len, you might be familiar with this. This is something we're trying to start doing at the advisory board, which is have a sort of a big meeting every year. Have it around the same time every year where we have a,
Yeah.
guest speaker come, or we have and we do the elections. We did it last year at the end of the fiscal year. And the idea is that a new set of officers are elected, a new set of board members are elected to do the work of the organization for the coming 12 months. And that's what this is trying to get at. So we are hoping that we could get the secretary as chair to actually come and at least say hello. And then we would also at this meeting elect the vice chair and probably vote on committee charges or anything like that if we have to do it. And that also might be that's also a good time to introduce all the new members. And we might even, if we can make it something that's really interesting, get not just the designees, but maybe the principals to come as well. So mayors or, like the chairman of my board or something like that. It might just be like a nice little pomp and circumstance thing that once a year, the folks that actually hold the seats come and kind of do the thing. So that's the idea with that. I hope that makes sense.
Makes sense what you're getting at, and so is there more to the question?
No, I'm just explaining why it's here.
Yeah.
And, trying to kind of have that be a kickoff or because November 1st is mentioned there, which is that the start of the federal fiscal year? Yeah. So
October 1st.
Yeah, I thought it was October 1st.
October 1st, excuse me.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
But by then we will have elected the new members. So
And if the Secretary of Education can't make it and preside,
they'll be invited. Whatever pressure can be brought to bear upon them and their schedule will be brought to bear upon them and their schedule.
but if they don't,
And it is what it is.
if they don't, but do we need to specify what happens if they don't, or we're all set?
No, because as chair, they can come at any time and preside. They always have precedence over
Okay.
anybody else for MassDOT.
Right.
So,
All right.
Tegan, I see your hand is up.
I didn't want to interrupt the flow of that questioning, just because my more minor point of clarification that we'll need to add in here is that I believe the MOU says that the vice chair needs to be elected at the next MPO meeting. So we would need to revise this to be either the next scheduled MPO meeting, or we could say if it's sooner, within 30 days, but we'll add that clarification.
Yeah, why don't we do nominations of a vice chair at this annual meeting? And then the
Well, that
election
wouldn't,
can be a formality.
I guess that wouldn't then, so then this annual meeting would need to occur before the new members are elected. That's the tricky part, because it's that the vice chair needs to be elected. Someone please correct me if you think I'm misspeaking, but the vice chair needs to be elected at the next board meeting after the others are elected, I believe.
So what's the timeline now?
That's correct.
So the first meeting after the election of the Boston Region MPO elected municipal representatives.
Right. So the way I'm reading that for this year is that the MPO elections end on October 5th. We could, I'm sorry, not October, Monday, October 3rd. And that we could either announce them at the meeting on the 6th, or in coordination, we could meet at the next meeting on October 20th. And then after that meeting, when the new elected members are announced, we would elect the vice chair.
Okay.
So to have the nominations happen at a separate meeting, which usually gives a little more space and time for people to think about who they want, who they want to nominate, that would have to actually occur before the new membership was announced. per the MOU.
Yep,
Tricky.
I see the rub. Okay, well, I'm of two minds here. One is to, try to get it done to elect the vice chair on the, November 1 or close to it. And another is wait till everybody's impaneled and have them vote. I don't know what the right answer is here. So if we don't do that, the annual general meeting will be, all of the new folks will be introduced. Theoretically, the secretary will say hello. And then what business transpires at that meeting, if any?
Certainly the election of the vice chair by majority vote per the MOU. Right, Jonathan, were you going to say anything
That's correct.
different?
I was gonna say exactly that.
Okay, that works for me.
So quick question, does this meeting happen right now? Is there currently an annual meeting? So this is proposing the creation, okay. I think this is my first kind of full year as the liaison, so it's helpful just for my own context, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't been doing the vice chair election like we're supposed to. So we're trying to kind of create a little reason to do it on this day. And it kind of makes sense, right? If this is when all the new members take their seats. Be nice if the secretary came and said hello. Maybe a couple of select board chairs come from somewhere, mayor or two. Everybody says nice things. We have a little election or a nomination or something. It's a nice way to kick off the year.
Yep, absolutely. Sounds
We
good.
can, CTPS, people can be made to wear special court uniforms, perform elaborate rituals. It'll be great. Be great.
One clarification question I would still have there, though, is then nominations for the vice chair. Would they happen at the same time as the election, or would they happen at a different time? And the reason why, I'm harping on that a bit is because of the fact that if you do the nomination in advance, you don't know the full slate of the new board members, which then gets you stuck with making the nominations at the same time as doing the elections, which allows for much less time for people to think through or make alternate. I'm not imagining that MEPC is going to be unseated anytime soon, but again, in some strange future where,
Yep.
we don't have MEPC as the vice chair.
I guess I would suggest something like, we can accept nominations for vice chair at this meeting. If there's more than one, the election will take place 30 days later, pick a number. If not, we'll proceed to the election that day. Something like that.
Is that not in conflict with the MOU language?
Yeah, it probably is.
It is.
But there's not wholesale turnover every year, right? There's only a handful of seats that turn over. So
Yeah.
It's not. Okay. Yeah. This is complicated.
Yeah.
You can see why they don't do it.
Because it seems to me that you probably want to end up having that meeting, in November, because it would give you a couple of weeks to get the new members on board. They could then make the nominations at their first meeting. That would be towards the end of October. That'd be the second meeting in October. And then the first meeting in November, you can then do the vote,
So how about this? What if the process for nominating and electing a vice chair is explained at this meeting?
At the annual meeting? Yeah. And that meeting's
That's around the 1st of November, right?
well, if you could have that at the end of October then, right? Because the new members will be coming on.
Yeah.
In
You're
that
right.
second meeting in October, which would be this meeting, we're explaining it, and then you take the nominations.
Yeah, but you're right. But then Tegan just again pointed out that we're in violation of the MOU if we do it that way.
Okay.
So the election,
Unless you could read that differently. that's how I read it. The first meeting after the election of the Boston Region MPO elected municipal representatives is when the vice chair needs to be elected.
I got you. Okay. I'm sorry.
So we could also, you could also do a process where you accept nominations via, email or otherwise in the interim, and that those nominations will be aired at the meeting and any additional nominations can be introduced and then there'll be a vote. That's a process I've seen before as well.
But wait a second, we're going to be violating the MOU no matter what we do, aren't we? Because Derek, did you just say that the elections are taking place on the 3rd and we have a meeting on the 6th of October?
I said that.
Well,
No, the elections are through October 3rd. That's what we have posted.
okay, and when's the MAPC annual meeting? Is that the 3rd?
I will have to look that up right now.
So theoretically, the election takes place. I mean, okay, so here's what we do. When you get elected, you're a member, you're a member elect. You're not actually a member. I don't know. Well, if the MOU says we have to have an election for a vice chair immediately after the election of new members, that means we have to have the vice chair elected sometime in October. That's how I read the MOU.
I just looked up our election process webpage. Nominations will close October 3rd. Election will be held electronically throughout October, and results will be announced at the MAPC Fall Council meeting on tentatively scheduled for October 26th. So we wouldn't do this until probably the November meetings.
Okay.
All right.
All right, how about this? In the operations plan, we put the vice chair seat may be elected at this meeting. Because if the MAPC election is ever delayed, we don't want to be in violation of our own rules. Right? The MOU clearly states it has to be the meeting after the election of new members, whenever that is. And MAPC controls that date, not us.
I mean, I guess it comes down to how involved we want new members in nominating the vice chair. I mean, if we want them involved, we need time to get them on board. I mean, in which case, I know that we're not rewriting, the MOU, but this might be just one case where we have to say, look, we understand what the MOU says, but it's just not workable with us trying to make it possible for new members to be a part of nominating the vice chair, and so we do it. We indicate that we know what we're doing, and then say this is one reason that we might need to tweak the MOU at some point in time. And
Okay. I mean, I would like to do the vice chair nominations and elections at the annual meeting.
okay. All right. Well, that's fine. I mean, I just said, not a hill to scrape my knee on. No blood loss for me, so.
Okay. Derek, do you feel strongly one way or another?
Not particularly. I think that works. This is probably one that I would want to run by Steve and David just to make sure
Please.
they're good with it. But it seems like, a reasonable request and something that we could probably coordinate and pull together. So I'll let you know if I get any feedback, but no immediate concerns. Yep.
Thank you. And then presiding officers will be the last topic we tackle today. Well, maybe we'll get to E. So this is what we've already discussed, sort of, when the designee of the chair or their alternate is not present, the vice chair assumes a presiding role. If the designees and alternates of both the chair and the vice chair are not present to preside, the board membership may elect a presiding officer for the meeting. So if the secretary, David Moeller and Steve Woelfel are unavailable, and if Mark Drayson, Eric Barassa, and who's MAPC's alternate? I should know.
Allison Felix
Thank you. And Alice are not available. So if none of those 6 people are available, what we're saying here is the board picks somebody to preside at the rest of that meeting or the rest of the meeting, so we can just get through the business. What are the odds of this happening? Slim to nil. But again, we think it's important to try to cover all contingencies.
The one thing we didn't clarify here is the majority vote adequate for that? I mean, I know these are getting so in the weeds, but it's part of the point of the operations plan.
Yes.
And how would that person be? Would there be like a nomination, a motion to nominate somebody?
Yeah, the other thing we could do is what they do in the House of Commons, which is the longest serving member presides.
Or could the executive director preside?
I think we should just let Tegan make all the choices, but that's not me. So, yes, the executive director could preside. Who's the longest serving member? Do we know?
Advisory council? I don't know.
David.
Yeah, no, I think it's a majority vote of the board. Then the board can nominate somebody to preside, like Tom Bent or something. And they preside at the meeting. Again, I think this is one of those circumstances that would never, very rarely happen. It would only happen if we really wanted to continue getting stuff done when they weren't there. I can assure you it would never happen for anything substantive, I don't think.
Not in this virtual world. I mean, I could imagine a situation where there's a snowstorm, and people getting stuck, meaning can't get there for whatever reason. But certainly nothing going to happen on the orange line after we've all fixed it, so we don't have to worry about that anymore.
It's nothing to do with me. I made that clear. I used to do diversions at the T long ago. No more. Okay, so we still have E and F to get through. We talked about not wanting F to be discussed until Eric gets back. And E. Why don't we leave E till next time as well?
Yeah, Brian, would you like me to give a little context for that one?
Please.
That came up in the development of the memo, which was a collaboration between staff, the chair, and the vice chair. And one of the flags in terms of needing to better define roles and responsibilities. I mean, we have to define roles and responsibilities of board members generally in the office plan, or we intended to. But there's a specific question about who represents the MPO, the board, when speaking to external parties, and in particularly that is important when talking about the press, right? And so, does somebody on the board have official responsibility for that? Is there a process that board members should follow when they are reached out to by the press about an MPO related question, et cetera? And so that deserves, according to that early development of the memorandum, we thought that deserves some attention by this group. Later process.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I certainly have feelings about this, my thoughts about it, but I'll wait for the chair to call on me for that.
Well, I'm suggesting we leave this till the next time, along with F. So we'll tackle E and F next time, along with anything else that we can come up with. When's our next A and F committee meeting?
September 5th. Yeah, there it is.
Okay. 9 o'clock. Okay, great. I'll block that out.
Everybody good on that?
I guess those two topics are. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I actually on the schedule, I do have a NCHRP panel meeting that I'm on that is like with 15 other people, and So I feel like I don't want to be the reason to change the meeting. I could also, if there's a quorum without me, I'm happy to sit it out, or we could reschedule. But I do have a conflict, unfortunately.
Okay.
I'm free on Wednesday, the 14th at 9. Basically any other day that week would be fine with me. It's just that Thursday that.
When's the next MPO meeting after this? Or when's the next MPO meeting?
Next MPO meeting, we have one on the 1st, and then we have one on the 15th, which would be after our proposal here. And then the next meeting for the MPO after that would be October 6th.
Well, I won't be here the 1st. So Derek, can you see if somebody else can come for you
Sure.
for this?
Yeah,
15th?
absolutely. Yep.
Then if there's anything of real substance, we'll run it all back by you.
Well, I guess later on the 15th, later in the day on the 15th is an option for you, Brian.
I'm sorry?
Later on the day on the 15th is not an option for you.
Nope, good question. Yep, I can do later in the day on the 15th, if there's a desire for that.
Well, the panel I'm on is like 8 to 5.
Oh,
It's
it's all
really
day.
an all day. Yeah, I'm
I got
supposed
you.
to be.
Yeah.
It's something I'm supposed to go to DC for theoretically, but they're allowing for virtual
I see.
participation. So yeah, that's why. Obviously, this is a huge priority. Otherwise, I would try to get out of it. It's just something that like,
Yeah.
there's hard to reschedule that one. So yeah, I
realize
think
it's all day.
Derek Schuster should be able to sit in for OTP. So I'll just forward him a notice for that. Should be just fine
All right,
for 9 a.m. Yep.
okay, so we'll plan on that.
Perfect.
Is there anything else, new business, member items, anything like that? Okay, is there a motion? Oh, Tegan, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to, for our purposes, confirm with this team that the next meeting will continue conversation on those 2 items. Brian, we can work with you in advance if there's any additional materials that we, should be gathering to support the conversation. And then at the next meeting, we should be ready to end far enough in advance of the MPO meeting so people can transition over, but also so that we can confirm the next topic, because I suspect we would wrap up those 2 E&F topics at the next meeting.
That's the plan. Okay, everybody clear? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Let's adjourn.
Without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.